If you guys have seen my videos on the Slideshow commentary community, or SCC, you're in for a treat. Doodletones, the diaper shitting artist that we've spoken of, released a video that's listing his idea of the top 10 worst commentaries of 2022. It's not as bad as it sounds. Then again, when you've seen George or Ephraim's list, another SCC member, it wasn't really competing with much. My favorite bit being that, as promised, Alex the Critic's video on Mr. Enter would end up on it. When it comes around to Alex's turn, Doodles not only put the Mr. Enter video, but also his SCC video, and had this to say about it.
One of the most out there things to come out of this year was, surprisingly, from the mysterious Mr. Enter, who released a review of Disney's Turning Red. It was one of the few times I saw Twitter come together in a mostly common consensus that the review was pretty head-ass, but also pretty funny for all the wrong reasons. While some people certainly took it too far, and I remember calling that out myself on Twitter during the initial fire, I, generally speaking, took little issue with people clowning on the want for the 9/11 terrorist attacks to be acknowledged in a kids' film. However, I'm merely one person, and maybe not everyone agreed with the bandwagoning of Mr. Enter. One such individual makes this entry, who is a commentator I've known about for a handful of years now, called Alex the Critic, who made 2 videos on the subject. An initial one defending Mr. Enter's review, and then a follow-up on the SCC once they caught wind of Alex's headassery. Technically, out of the 2, I consider the latter to be worse, but not only does it become a video somewhat on me at a point, so it's ineligible for this year, but also, I don't really care to talk about anti-vax narratives, and that's like the whole second half of the video.
His second half of the video is anti-vaccine narratives. If you don't know or need a refresher, a couple months back, the SEC didn't like Alex's video defending Mr. Enter, and there were some funny interactions early on, but it wasn't until he said this that things really kicked off. He pointed out a disingenuous take from an SEC member, Toganinium or Dwebley, who was conflating anti-mandate of the vaccine as anti-vaccine, and there were some rather humorous comparisons, to say the least. Some great takes from Limbo Fazframe. I'm guessing you're also against washing your hands when working at a restaurant or health clinic. Wait a second, that's odd. Where did that go? This tweet was deleted by the tweet author. Why? Surely they didn't realize how fucking retarded that was. It doesn't stop there, folks. It gets better. So does that mean I should drive on the sidewalk, damning the consequences in whether someone gets hit? They said that Alex can't use that to be representative of their whole community from just one person saying it. Yet almost all of them are agreeing with Dwebley and saying it. Alex and I both pointed out how they were proving his point by agreeing with Dwebley. And Alex makes this same point in his video. The same video Doodles is talking about, where she calls it anti-vaccine narratives, and proving his very fucking point. The point that their community is disingenuous and conflating anti-mandate as anti-vaccine. But it doesn't stop there. It never seems to, because this also proves one of the many points that I've made about them, that they will deny your point being right at all costs, and then turn around and prove it. I said this when responding to George, a Slideshow commentator. Anytime criticism goes to your community, or even Doodletones, several of you will rush to do a handful of things, immediately trying to deny the point being right, not even considering it possibly being right, just immediately trying to shut that shit down. It's immediately wrong. You misrepresent that point, and you deny that the point is right on the basis of your own misrepresentation of it. And then because your community is so collectively fucking stupid, you all will trip over your own arguments and each other's arguments when you're trying to shut that shit down, when you're crusading to get the person to shut the fuck up. And it's when that very moment happens that you accidentally prove the person right. Ephraim and Doodletones aren't even my only examples of this. Dwebley also did this in my comments. Back when I was being compared to Darkscythe or Nicole, Dwebley got into a bit of a back and forth. The key moment being when he copied Mr. A's tweet into my comment section. The tweet where Mr. A directly says, "I'm pretending to be Nicole," only for Dwebley to then deny that anyone was saying I was pretending to be Nicole. He did admit to being wrong, only to wipe his comments and take some silly fucking break. But now you know where they get it from. Monkey see, monkey do. And to be clear, it wasn't the action of putting his video on the list that made him right. It was Doodles conflating the anti-mandate portion of his video as anti-vaccine narratives. And this still isn't my favorite part. That's coming up in just a second.
So instead, I'll just slap on the initial video, but it's not like it's gonna much matter. A lot of my complaints are the same anyway.
Let's also not forget the fact that Enter's issue with the film setting isn't left at the visuals are too colorful. He also mentions how some of the actions that the characters take in the film wouldn't be tolerated in the real world at the time.
Alex kinda reminds me of that kid Douglas a bit.
I'd have to disagree with that one only because Alex didn't start out mindlessly sucking your cock.
But what really got under a lot of people's skin was the fact that she expressed other people's rights to have fetishes, which made a lot of people think that she was a fetishist. Although, in no way did her video indicate that she was a fetishist herself. But, it's the internet and people often take things way out of proportions. And so they ran with it, which led to people believing that Doodletones had a diaper fetish. The fact that people legitimately believe that Doodletones had some kind of a diaper fetish is so monumentally stupid that it's almost not even worth talking about. But this is the Guide to Surviving the Internet, and we cover internet history, so we have to talk about it. Needless to say, everybody ran with it, and it earned her the embarrassing nickname Doodle Diapers.
Specifically in regards to the passively spiteful approach that can turn aggressive when provoked, and his need to take things out of context or misconstrue a narrative to make himself seem smart, which, as someone who's off and on checked up on Alex during his earlier commentaries, frankly I'm a little disappointed. Like, I've ribbed at some of his earlier work and some of the strange wording he had back then, but it wouldn't have crossed my mind to call him outright dishonest like I can in this video.
After dishonestly representing a second half of one of his videos, you're gonna sit here and call him the dishonest one?
For context, Alex goes through a number of tweets relating to the situation, which, I want to clarify, not a big deal, until you notice that some of the tweets he specifically points to are either jokes he takes way too seriously, such as the case was with Bennett the Human, or were a part of a much larger thread with way more nuance than Alex gives them credit for. As an example, the tweet from Nerdy Sasquatch spotlighted in Alex's video is taken so far out of context from the initial point, it's insane. Cause Alex claims that Nerdy was straight up calling Mr. Enter alt-right.
Mr. Enter, along with the likes of Nostalgia Critic, CinemaSins, The Quartering, and many other alt-right griftubers, have done so much damage to the art of film criticism and have made the discourse surrounding cinema and pop culture even more toxic. Imagine being called an alt-right grifter simply for having a disagreeable take on a movie.
But when you actually go to check the thread itself, they clarify that they weren't calling Mr. Enter alt-right, but rather using him in tandem with alt-right griftubers as an example of toxic media critique. It's an entirely separate conversation, but Alex argues as if that tweet stands on its own. And while you can argue that the clarification that Nerdy wasn't calling Mr. Enter alt-right wasn't made for 6 hours, something that wouldn't have been shown in Alex's video, mind you, that still doesn't put him in the clear when that clarification was made an hour before Alex even got the screen cap to put in his video. So this was just negligence, at best. But then you have arguments like he makes against Barrelcord, and it becomes significantly harder to justify that benefit of doubt, because he claims Barrel goes on to take Enter out of context, when not only does he not prove that notion within his video, but she left a fucking timestamp to the full context in the very next tweet as a source? Never mind how the argument itself against Barrel amounts to, that quote is old, don't use things from years ago, something that rings incredibly hollow when he just finished berating Animat in the very same video for his beef with Yoshi Player from 2017.
Weren't you also the same nigga who blocked people for giving you constructive criticism?
Ever since Animat has started this whole Sony animation hatred thing, a lot of people have been calling him out on his behavior, and quite frankly, the way he responds to people is actually pretty damn negative.
Alex went on to talk about integrity in the comments section, replying to a comment Akumu made, talking about how it's cowardly to not go and confront someone directly about their points, snidely alluding to me as his example after I voiced some distaste for the video in a subtweet.
Snidely alluded to you. Interesting. Either you're really fucking blind, or you're intentionally not acknowledging something within your own fucking screenshot. The SCC is cool with Jar because him and Doodles aren't beefing, like a certain transgender individual whose name starts with D did not too long ago. Well, who could that be? It's almost like you were clearly brought up in the fucking conversation. Almost like you're calling him dishonest, while dishonestly presenting your example to build up this hypocrisy point against him. Whoa!
And his need to take things out of context or misconstrue a narrative to make himself seem smart.
That's like meta projection of dishonesty.
Points people made on Twitter. Like, he can claim that he's directly putting the tweets in a video and addressing them that way, but people like Bennett and Beryl and Lychee, 3 people I know who were mentioned in this video, didn't even know until word got out in the SCC about it. That's not exactly confrontation, my man. It effectively functions in the same way as a subtweet does. At least Liam was consistent in his beliefs about it, directly tagging those who he covers on Twitter, though if we really want to talk integrity, then where's yours when you constantly talk about how people take Mr. Inter out of context, and then be not only doing it yourself, but be perfectly okay in the intellectual dishonesty you present in your video directly? I'm just saying, check yourself first. You should start practicing what you preach before getting on to others for a lack of real integrity.
This entire fucking tangent of yours is absolutely meaningless. It's based off of the idea that you were sub-commented about or something like that you weren't name-dropped. But you were. You didn't name drop Alex. That was his point to begin with. You subtweeted about him. You didn't bring him up in your tweet, and he pointed that out. You're comparing that to a fucking conversation that you were directly mentioned in, while ignoring the fact that you were directly mentioned in it, that I first brought you up and he further alluded to you. Neither yours or the tweet you were quoting mentions Alex by name. Now apparently Doodletones has unlisted this video and admitted to being wrong about Alex's second half of the video. My question is, why did you make that claim about the second half if you didn't even fucking watch it? You put a video on your list that you didn't even watch. This backpedaling of, I was wrong about Alex's second half of the video isn't relevant to the fact you dishonestly presented a screenshot to build up to a hypocrisy finger point that only amounts to a reach, claiming that Alex essentially did the same thing you did and that he needs to practice what he preaches. I shouldn't even be surprised, considering you are an FCK member, but don't shit in your diaper just yet, because I still have your fruitcake cuck episode to make. And that whole thing about Alex's video becoming a video on you, making it ineligible.
But not only does it become a video somewhat on me at a point, so it's ineligible for this year.
Since when? Your worst of the year lists have a tradition of having videos about you on them, spanning all the way from its conception in 2016. His worst of the year list, with the least amount of videos about him on it, is 2019, with just one in the honorable mentions. It's almost like Doodles uses this list to target videos dunking on him. Now, how do I put this gently? The reason your community is so goddamn niche, or more accurately, dry as a bone and lonely, is because you're so fucking basic. The constant subtweets, the pride strutting like cats and then bitching out when any push ever comes to shove, the lack of balls and testicular fortitude for any conflict and confrontation, the retarded fucking reaches. So many of you repeat the same shit. And again, these are all criticisms that could apply to mainstream commentary. So let me provide some specific ones, talking about what you bring to the commentary table. Almost everyone is in every group, pretty much making them all the same fucking group. Especially when all the groups say the same things against one another, just at different fucking times. Mainstream commentary, whether that be gameplay or camera, aren't in very many groups these days, yet your community's own mainstream has a bunch of groups. Now, some could argue that it adds a interesting layer to your community, if it wasn't for the fact that all of these groups pretty much have the exact same fucking people. Almost everyone is in almost every group, and because almost everyone says the same shit just at different times, ultimately making it nothing more than a completely pointless structure to make your community look more interesting than it actually is.